Well, many of you gardeners are asking that age-old question that we hear real often this time of year about why are my tomatoes not setting fruit? And many of you are saying that your tomato plants are green and healthy looking. You've got good flowers on there, but you're simply not getting any fruit. Well, again, we can blame this thing on the weather. And I think many of us have experienced this year because temperatures are very critical in the fruit set of tomatoes and many of our other vegetables in the garden for that matter, but especially tomatoes and related crops. If the nighttime temperature is below 65 degrees or above about 75 degrees, the temperatures are simply at a point where they will interfere with good fruit set on the tomato plant. Also, if the daytime temperatures are above about 94 or 95 degrees, you're going to get poor fruit set on your tomato plants. And that's what's happened this year. You may see that many of your tomatoes are looking like this, in which you had a nice cluster of flowers. Some of these flowers have opened up and looked really good. And about the time you think you'll get a tomato on there, that flower disappears. And so all you have is a little flower stub there, or that flower blossom has been on. Well, there's really not too much we can do about it because, as you recall, earlier in the season we had some really cool nights, and then we suddenly got a series of really hot, high temperature days, and so that interfered with our fruit set. We were fortunate here in Oklahoma gardening studio to have some of our tomatoes out early under some walls of water. We got some good early growth, and there was a time period there we had some ideal temperatures for fruit set, and so we're enjoying those with a lot of large tomatoes and several ripe tomatoes that we've been able to harvest. But even on ours here, we have very, very few small tomatoes that indicate there has been a period there when we didn't have any fruit set at all. Well, I think the best thing we can do on these is simply to try to keep our tomatoes healthy. You shouldn't have very many disease problems this time of the year because the humidity is so low and the light intensity is so bright that this really cuts down on foliage diseases to a great extent. But we do have insect problems and mite problems showing up on the tomato plant, so keep the insects and mites and watch for diseases and keep those off the plant. Then also you want to keep your plants watered well and in a good vigorous growing condition so that when these temperatures moderate, hopefully within the next few weeks or at least by late summer and fall, you'll have some more fruit set. And another thing you might want to do too is consider maybe looking at some varieties of tomatoes that are less sensitive to heat stress next year in your garden. For example, the early varieties such as Early Girl, which is also a small fruited variety, seems to set fruit a lot more easier in these high temperatures than some of the other varieties. And also the smaller fruited tomatoes such as the cherry tomatoes and the salad tomatoes and Roma and some of those types seem to be less sensitive also to heat stress. Another tip that I might give you is to be sure that you do keep your tomatoes harvested, because if you harvest the tomatoes as they begin to ripen, this takes some stress away from the plant itself so that it can make better utilization of the water and nutrients that it has. And this is also true of many of our other plants in the garden. Sweet corn, for example, is also temperature sensitive, and if you have some late corn, you may not get good kernel set on that. We also know that squash and cucumbers and peppers and many of our plants are temperature sensitive when we get high temperatures, and simply keeping the fruit harvested, not allowing it to over mature, really reduces the stress on these plants. So my tip to you now is to just keep your plants in good healthy condition and hope for better fruit set when we get some moderation in temperature a little later on this year.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.